Growing up, unlike most kids, I absolutely loved going to the laundromat. I don't know, I got this crazy sense of accomplishment when I'd see all my dirty clothes clean again. It made me feel all good inside. Having clean clothes was the best feeling. It made me feel like I could do anything. Oh shit. Oh god. Yo, I can't do this. Who wrote this? Oh, I wrote it?
I came to save the day, never fear.
Yo, the real reason I would love going to laundromats was due to the fact that it had an arcade with a wide range of games. See, going to arcades was one of the best joys of my adolescence. I especially remember developing an affinity for fighting games after my run-in with the genre-defining Street Fighter 2. My bro and I would plug mad hours into that game. You guys ever love the game series so much that you played literally every single game in the series, even the weird-ass ones that no one else played? Yeah, that was pretty much me with Street Fighter. Some might call it obsessive, but hey, what do they know, right? Now, there used to be this old neighborhood laundromat, and on Sundays, this place was always popping. I remember stopping by on this one particular Sunday afternoon, ready for some competition. I mean, I was just itching to give somebody that Chun-Li leg work. So, after helping my mom load up the dirty clothes, I made my way down to the arcade section per usual. And for some reason, the game section was popping a lot more than usual. Then I remember the owner saying something about a new game. The atmosphere in the section was hype, but instead of gamers being filled with oohs and ahs, it was more like,
What the fuck?
yo, people were screaming in disbelief. Shit was wild. The game to which I set my eyes on was the infamous Mortal Kombat. The game, as some of you may know, is pretty well known for its violence, and it was unlike anything I had ever played before. At that age, I didn't even know the human body could do stuff like that. Violence and gore aside, the series always did seem to carry itself a bit differently than most. I don't know, there was just something all too intriguing about seeing gods, ninja clans, warriors, creatures, cops, and Hollywood martial artists all fighting together that made me go,
let's get this party started.
Spearheaded by Ed Boon and John Tobias, Mortal Kombat was developed by Midway Games and was released into arcades in 1992. Now, I was too young to have played the OG Mortal Kombat when it first graced arcades all over, but I still consider myself a day one fan of the gameplay madness. It wasn't until my run-in with two particular games, that of Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero and Mortal Kombat 4, that I really started to dive into the story. There were quite a few things that ultimately got me more into the series, but I'd say the biggest contributor was most definitely just how cinematic the series had gotten. MK Mythology and 4 were the catalyst and definitely kicked it off. MK Mythologies, timeline-wise, predates that of even the very first Mortal Kombat. It actually ends with Sub-Zero somewhat being recruited by Shang Tsung to compete in the very first tournament that started it all. The game itself was nothing amazing. It's ultimately a glorified side story put in the form of an action-adventure game. Now, with that said, I do feel Ed Boon and John Tobias gave us a fun, atmospheric ride. They let us go deeper into the gory, dark political fantasy that is Mortal Kombat. This wouldn't be the last time Ed Boon and company would try their hand at something like this. See, much later down the Midway timeline in 2005, they dropped a gem of a game called Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks that got the total opposite critical reception that befell Mythologies. The game was amazing, and I think it deserves a remaster or a sequel of some kind in the future. We'll talk more on that at another time, but for now, back to Sub-Zero. Another factor that aided in the game's dark atmospheric vibe was how it was filmed. Yes, I said filmed. Mythologies was actually the first game young dads had ever played that included legit live-action cutscenes rather than the standard animated cutscenes that was featured in most games at the time. And I think the MK team deserves major props because you have to be pretty damn confident in your characters and story to dedicate multiple spin-off games that deviate from the already well-established and loved formula. Side note, when you get the chance, please do yourself the grandest of favors and go check out the Mythologies behind-the-scenes bloopers. That shit is gold. Now, even though for the most part, Mythologies was a failed attempt to branch out, this game was also quite telling of the strong narrative roots that Midway Games had in them. Over time, the series would become even more story-based, and no game in the series foreshadowed this more than Mortal Kombat 4. MK4 came out at an interesting time, October 15th, 1997 to be exact, And by the mid to late 90s, the 16-bit era that had served us all well was coming to an end. Advancements in technology allowed games to go from 2D to 3D. Developers all over the world tried their hand at this. Many game series even saw a boost in popularity, meanwhile others didn't fare too well in the new age. MK4 was on the wrong end. It didn't do too hot. Now with that being said, it was obvious a considerable amount of work had gone into it. It had crazy amounts of cutscenes with a wide range of new characters with pretty intriguing backstories. This was a bit uncommon for me. See, at the time, that was the most cutscenes with voice acting I had ever seen in a fighting game. It was clear that the devs tried to add some flair to the series by adding in the option to pick up random projectiles in combat, and the sidestep mechanic definitely changed up the meta. I have so many solid memories with MK4. I mean, seeing Quan Chi rip someone's leg off for the first time, that's a memory that's kinda hard to forget. Now, admittedly, as much fun as I had with this entry in the series, I have to say, yo, this shit did not age well. Some of the fatalities and dialogue, I find myself dying of laughter at.
Wait, this is brutality! You can't do it! Wrong, Jarek. This is not a brutality. This is a fatality.
This game was a misstep, sure, but I couldn't wait to see the next big step in the overall narrative thread of Mortal Kombat. There aren't many fighting games I can say that about. Next up is when things really start to get interesting. It wasn't until Midway Games made their next venture into 3D that the cinematic approach and world of MK became so fleshed out that no matter how much of a departure the new gameplay was, I just couldn't ignore it. Now, for those of you who haven't played what I like to call the Armageddon trilogy, I don't really know where to start. I guess I could tell you that everything you thought that you once knew about the series, forget about it. The gameplay was different and fully incorporated a weapon system that was somewhat introduced in Mortal Kombat 4. Characters had gone through drastic changes in both design and in other areas. Needless to say, this turned some people off from the series while bringing in a totally new set of fans. See, the Armageddon trilogy was many younger fans' first MK game. I gotta be honest with you, I was not the biggest fan of the combat. I had been hoping sometime soon that the series would return to its roots, but clearly that was not happening anytime soon. So I said screw it and tried to enjoy the series. Now, even though I wasn't necessarily a fan of how the series was changing gameplay wise, I will say that this was the most engaged I had ever been story wise in an MK game. I low-key became pretty addicted, and I just had to know what would happen next, especially with each new entry in the trilogy becoming even more bleak than the previous. Those games definitely needed a bit more polishing, but still to this day, I have a soft spot for Mortal Kombat Deception. It is without a doubt the strongest of the trilogy, but it's also one of my all-time favorite story modes ever crafted by Ed Boon and company. The fact that the game opens with Raiden teaming up with Quan Chi and Shang Tsung, now you know some crazy shit going down. But by the end of the final game in the trilogy, it was obvious that the Mortal Kombat series just wasn't what it used to be. And not too long after, Midway Games had shut down. I will say this though, one thing that was enjoyed by newcomers and old fans alike was the expansion of the world. Even people who weren't, say, massive fans of the 3D era will tell you that they at least enjoyed the story aspect of the new entries. But that was the end. Midway Games was gone, and that was that. At least, that's what I thought until, fast forward some years into the future, Ed Boon and company were back, under their new name, NetherRealm Studios, or, as we in the community call it, NRS. NRS had released their 9th MK game in the series, simply called Mortal Kombat, which basically was a reboot. Not only that, but it was a true return to form with modern day changes, much like how Street Fighter 4 was for the Street Fighter series. Mortal Kombat 9 was well loved and well received by fans and critics alike. I felt all my old MK passion coming back. Of course, with the game doing as well as it didn't take long for a sequel to be on its way. Mortal Kombat 10, aka MKX, did pretty damn well too, and even brought in more fans to the community. And NRS proved that it could not only deliver on a solid fighting game, but it could also treat its players to an amazing narrative, which now brings us to the recently released MK11. This game might just be my favorite Mortal Kombat game. Nearly everything I loved about the previous installments, this game seems to have perfected. The Mortal Kombat series has definitely had its ups and downs, but I can't think of one fighting game franchise that has learned from its mistakes and evolved as much as MK. Mortal Kombat has become one of my all-time favorite game series because of its relentless pursuit of perfection. And even when things didn't quite go their way, they still did their best to ensure that the story was at least bomb as fuck. In my humble opinion, they crafted a world that feels more alive than any other fighting game. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how lore and perfection can save a game series. Once again, thanks for letting me chat your ear off, everyone. And now, while I don't necessarily think Mortal Kombat is the best fighting game series ever, I do find it to be the most intriguing. And what's a fighting game series that you guys seem to love? And if you guys don't have a fighting game that you're into, then what's a game series that you seem to love the lore for? Everyone's got one. I know I got a few. And if any of my fighting game connoisseurs are out there and you guys have not picked up MK11, what are you doing? Go get it. No matter if you're interested from a story standpoint or a competitive standpoint, go check it out. It's dope. Also, I don't know about you guys, but there are many MK characters out there I like to see come back for future games, like the mysterious Rico from Mortal Kombat 4, or even the God of Wind Fujin, or even Kai, who is literally, I think, the only black Shaolin warrior I've ever seen. But also, guys, be sure to follow me on Twitter at featuring Dez, all one word, and be sure to follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and everywhere else. Until next time, this is Dez from Featuring Dez, signing out. Peace.
Hey, yo, Game Boy, I got you on this one, bro. Let me show them how I get down on this one, you know what I'm saying? Yo, they got me feeling like Johnny, the way they put me in a cage. Would have thought they were Scorpion, the way they ever try to keep me chained down. I don't really do this for the fame.